Colleen Harrison. I am an enrolled agent and a former IRS revenue agent. I spent 17 years as a revenue agent in the field examining individuals and businesses' books and records and assessing taxes. One thing that I have discovered recently, and probably was unfamiliar with for a while, it surprised me, put it that way, that so many tax return preparers really are not well trained, they're not experienced, they don't ask enough questions. Now that of course doesn't mean that all tax preparers are not well trained, but there are a large majority of tax preparers that are not going to do you any justice. If they make a lot of errors on your tax return, the person who will be responsible is not the tax preparer. It will be you, the taxpayer. You are signing your tax return under penalties of perjury. So it is definitely in your best interest to know who you're dealing with, to understand their experience, their knowledge, their training, their expertise. And even with all these credentials, you must look at the finished product or the prepared tax return before signing it. Now, if you find any errors, the tax preparer needs to make corrections. Now, obviously, you may not understand the tax laws, and you're leaving it up to the tax professional to make the right decisions. Unfortunately, though, they don't all do that. Some are just not well trained, they're in over their heads on an issue. So you have got to be extremely cautious. Take the time to look over the tax return to make sure that it makes sense. Especially if you have a complicated tax return. You have to be assured that what you are reporting is substantially correct. Of course, you might make an error, an honest mistake. The tax preparer could also make an honest mistake. But too often there are many egregious mistakes that could have been avoided that aren't discovered unless there's an audit, and then you have to face the consequences of having a lot of adjustments to that tax return, disallowing expenses that shouldn't have been on there, overstated expenses, non-existent expenses, understatement of income, credits that you weren't entitled to, and on and on and on. Now, obviously, you don't know a great deal about the tax laws. That's why you're going to a professional. But the professional should be asking questions that pertain to your current tax return that they are preparing. You need to sit down and discuss these things with your preparer, either in person, over the telephone, or in some means of communication, whether it's by email, fax, or whatever. It's imperative that you do so. Otherwise, you might find that you are audited not just for 1 year, but for prior and subsequent years, because the same issues that occurred in the 1 year that the audit began seem to be recurring in other years as well, and then you're going to get hit with an audit examination report that is proposing changes to more than 1 year. It could be 2, 3 more years. Now you don't want that, because when you add all the interest and penalties to this, the debt that you may owe in taxes could become, for you, exponential. No one wants to owe taxes, and that's one of the reasons why we don't prepare our own tax returns. We go to a professional, someone that we trust, someone who advertises knowledge and experience. But you do need, just like going to a doctor, you do need to check out those credentials. Unfortunately, during the filing season, when people are preparing tax returns, they may become overwhelmed with the volume that they're preparing and just not give your particular tax return the time and attention that it deserved. So it's up to you to ensure that your tax preparer is well aware of all the circumstances that pertain to your tax return. Don't leave it up to their memory. Check to make sure that what you have provided to them is reflected on the tax return. And I say this to you because I have a client who has been doing business with a particular tax preparer who advertises in a way that appears to have great credentials. However, this particular tax preparer, in spite of the fact that they are an enrolled agent and have been in business for numerous years, this particular preparer made some egregious mistakes. And my client now has to pay for these mistakes. So a word to the wise, please review the tax return, even if you don't understand it. Have the tax preparer go over it with you. If you don't agree with something, ask questions, find out. I mean, in most cases, the tax preparer should know more about taxes than you do. And it's obvious that, you're going to a tax preparer because you don't know enough about taxes. But don't assume that everyone out there who advertises tax preparation can do a good job for you. So I feel that it's in your best interest to take the time to ask questions, to invest your money according to the quality that you're expecting out of that tax professional. If they're going to only take a half an hour, it may not be in your best interest to hire them, because your tax return might just take many hours, especially if it's being done correctly and it's a complex tax return with a lot of significant and sophisticated issues and transactions. With that in mind, I just wanted to give that little heads up about tax preparers. I hate to say this, but they're not all well-trained, experienced, and they're not all knowledgeable. So please take the proper precautions. Otherwise, you're going to pay the price. You're going to pay the price in additional taxes, interest, and penalties. Thank you for listening. I hope this has been helpful to you.